Hello, everyone. Good morning, and welcome to our Whereoware webinar, Google Making UX a Ranking Factor in 2021. What do you need to do now? My name is Anna Yunker. I am a Senior Digital Strategist at Whereoware. So that means I help our clients figure out how to best use digital technologies to reach their growth objectives.
And my name is Rachel Meyer. I am the Associate Director of Media Activation, and I work in tandem with Anna and our other digital strategists to implement the media and make optimizations as well as help with the reporting piece.
Before we dive in, I do have just a couple reminders. We will send a recording of this after, like a day after the webinar, so don't feel like you have to take a ton of notes because we'll be covering a lot. Also, if you have any questions, feel free and submit those in the chat, and we'll kind of keep monitoring those during the presentation and get to those at the end if we have time. And lastly, we have a special offer at the end. If you're a webinar attendee, you can meet with a Whereoware expert for a free evaluation of your website, and based on this checklist we'll be giving out. So really excited to get talking to you today. Really quickly, if you're not familiar with Whereoware, we are a full-service digital agency with more than 20 years of experience based out of kind of the Washington, D.C. area. And we really help clients grow through digital marketing strategy and activation. Whereoware combines design, technology, and marketing automation activation to help our clients achieve their goals. And we specialize in areas like e-commerce, marketing optimization, and we use all these to help our customers reach their goals of customer acquisition, retention, and maximization. So what we're really here to talk about today is the Google Page Experience Update and how they're adding in this experience ranking as a search ranking factor as of 2021. Now, as of late May 2020, Google announced that these metrics would start impacting search results in 2021. And we'll talk a little bit later about how the timeline has kind of shifted on that. As of April this year, they said this would be pushed back slightly into rollout of June to August, where initially they said May 2021 was the target. So this is going to be rolling out actually, mid-June right now. So it's great you're on this webinar to hear kind of how you can measure and understand what you can do to help your site if you're impacted by any of these metrics. So first of all, why does Google care about user experience? They've said for years that really what matters is great content and the experience of people once they get to the search results. And it really supports them to give you the best web page for all of your queries. And they look at things like, bounce rates from pages or how long you spend on a site after you click through to the results. So they've kind of been always talking about giving the best experience for these users. And this update really supports that. Because over time, they've actually, tried to decrease the number of irrelevant results. Again, really just, they make thousands of updates every year with the core updates, really trying to optimize for the best experience on a site. And this all kind of goes back to their goal of giving the user the best experience when they're using their search engine. And you may be thinking like, wasn't this already important for SEO? And you're right, because some of the updates that have rolled out in the past, like Mobilegeddon and the secure search, all of these have really tried to help people understand how people are experiencing their site. But what this update's really trying to do is it's more like a rebranding of all of those factors and a focusing to help a lot of teams understand where they should start, right? There was a lot of tools and metrics we'll talk about, but it wasn't really very clear up until this point about what were the most important for Google and what impact that user experience on the site. So think of this as kind of like a focusing and prioritization for your team as like, where should we start? And they define it really, the page experience is this set of signals about how the users are perceiving their experience on your site beyond just kind of the information that's included. And they're going to look at all these metrics. We'll kind of show you a list what's going to be included in this page experience update. But ultimately what this means is that, if everything is equal and your page experience is better than another page with the exact same, content, that page will rank higher in search results. So it's also important that content still is very, matters, right? Rachel's going to talk a little bit about this later in the presentation, but that experience could give you a boost in search results if you have optimized for those. So what will go into this page experience update, kind of like we talked about, those existing search signals that you've already kind of heard about and maybe been optimizing for. So all the work you've been doing is going to help you in this update as well. And what we're mostly going to focus on are these core web vitals. Now, there are an extended list of web vitals that we don't include here, but Google, again, has talked about focusing on these core 3. Now, you probably heard me say earlier that, they launched this back in May 2022. They started saying, hey, we're going to be updating this in 2021. And their initial timeline said they would start rolling out in May of 2021. And you're like, well, it's mid-June. Well, they actually shifted that back to say that this will be a kind of a slow rollout starting in mid-June, and then we'll kind of roll through August. And what you should probably leave here today, if you remember anything, is that it will roll out for mobile first. They're going to keep these metrics separate to look at a mobile experience and a desktop experience. And mobile will be rolling out first. So if you're prioritizing metrics that you need to kind of dig into, look at those mobile metric scores first. It's also important to note there will not be a combined score. So, you have a mobile score and a desktop score for all these metrics, and there's never going to be kind of this notion of a combined score. So a lot of these tools will show you your mobile score and your desktop score. So what will this take into account? Again, today we won't have time to cover everything, but we are going to talk about, the core web vitals and then an existing search signal, really, the importance of content maintains and quality content. So we're going to dive into each of these areas a little more. And again, we have a checklist that you'll be getting so you can walk through each of these recommendations and make check on your own progress at the end. Really helpful. Love a checklist. Now, what are the core web vitals? Again, this is this initiative by Google to provide this unified guidance to help people understand what they're looking at as a great experience on the website. You've probably seen this crazy list of acronyms and you're like, oh my gosh, what does this mean? So, a few points about these core web vitals. First, the page experience is not one ranking score. Each of these elements has its own weight and ranking in the Google algorithm. So, as you look at these, they're all going to be looked at kind of individually. Second, the metrics that make up these core web vitals will evolve over time. So Google said that as of 2021, these are the 3 core vitals they're going to look at, and also the thresholds that they understand as a good performance. But they're also saying that these will evolve over time, and actually on one of our slides, we're going to talk about how they've actually changed and evolved the cumulative layout shift metric already with feedback from the developer community. So they're really open to feedback in terms of people using these in the field and giving them that input. And lastly, these are all how Google calls like field metrics, meaning they can be measured with real users in the field. So on a lot of these reports, you'll see a note about a field metric or maybe like a lab metric. And because we're trying to, again, understand how users are experiencing the site, a lot of these can be measured in the field and some of them in the lab too, to help support kind of the measurement. So when you think of these, think of that real user experience and measuring those with real users, like with the Chrome UX report or Page Speed Insights. Ooh, okay, we're going to jump into the first one, which is loading. So what does this mean in real terms? Are users stuck waiting for your website to load? And this is that largest content paint, or LCP in the acronyms. And this is not, a great experience. So what this looks at is the largest image or element within a viewport, what a user can see on their screen without scrolling. So they've actually updated some of the reporting to help developers and more of the technical people understand what that element is, because again, it's evolving metrics, right? So they're trying to give people better guidance on what they can optimize. So for example, on this screen, you can see on this mobile device that this image might be the largest element, right? It's a lot of imagery, maybe videos. They've also been looking at how they're impacting like background videos and things like that. So if this is slow to load, they want it to load within 2.5 seconds. If you're not meeting that criteria of 2.5 seconds, what can you do to help improve that loading time? A couple things you could do. One are to look at images and videos, can you compress and cache those images and videos without impacting any of the quality? And could you maybe lazy load some of those images or video, specifically on mobile? And again, this rollout will impact mobile first. So definitely take a look at those mobile scores and how they're looking at that first content pane on mobile. The next one is first input delay, FID, or interactivity. So this means how people are interacting with their site. Are they waiting if they're trying to click on a button? Is something not reacting to them when they're clicking on the site? For first input delay, this is really trying to measure that time it takes from your browser to respond to any activity by the user. So it's analyzing those taps and clicks and key presses, and there, something's happening in the background that's not letting that happen and is slowing it down. So sometimes this can lead to click rage, right? People are clicking and nothing's happening. Something's blocking that browser from understanding what's happening. And this is usually due to some like unnecessary JavaScript on the main thread, like blocking some type of interaction from being recognized. So what you need to do is really just dive into some of that JavaScript. So a lot of code, we're not technical on this call, but definitely get your developers involved in understanding what's running and if anything can be optimized or eliminated on the JavaScript. Another note here is that FID, or first input delay, is only a field metric, meaning it's only measurable in the field. If you're looking at your lab or some of these other reports, you can look at the total blocking time, or TBT. So that's the metric you can try and optimize to impact this core web vital. So just make sure you're looking at that in the lab. Another kind of other ways you can improve interactivity in general is just to make sure that your clickable elements are, you can acknowledge which ones are clickable and which ones aren't. So having like a clear layout and make sure that you're not blocking any of the clickable elements. Now this isn't necessarily, impacting the first input delay, but it's making sure that users understand, again, that experience on your site, what's clickable, what's not. Is it easy to get to those elements? Can they see them, right away and understand that it's clickable? And the last web vital is the hardest to say. Cumulative layout shift, or CLS, measures kind of visual stability. So is your website jumping around, making it really difficult for users to click or read? A lot of times this is due to ads loading, and I'm sure you've been in the situation where you're reading an article, scrolling through on your phone, all of a sudden a big image jumps in, pushes your text down, and you lose your place. So really not a great experience for the users there. It also can happen because of moving CTAs or calls to action. You have a call to action that loads in after the fact, pushes everything around. Really that jumping, that stability of the page. They're trying to understand how you can make it very stable and give a kind of expected experience for that user. There was actually, and this is the metric I said at the beginning, that has an update as of early June 2021, and it's kind of evolving. And thanks to feedback from the development community, they've actually changed this slightly so that this metric is called cumulative because each individual shift is kind of summed up on the lifespan of a page. Now, if you think about some pages, they have more of like, a long-lived page, like maybe you have a single page app or some kind of infinite scroll. Oh, sorry. But anyway, so they updated it to have a cap, essentially. So again, these metrics are evolving and they'll be updated as kind of experience comes in. So we have, wonder if this is going to play. So we have a video here to kind of explain this point more, because I think it's one of the newer ones, or ones that's maybe new to people. You can see here in this example from Google that this is the worst case scenario of what a cumulative layout shift would happen, right? You have, you're on an order screen, you're trying to go back, something loads at the top, pushes the page down, you actually place an order when you weren't meaning to. Not a great experience, and really could be improved. So that unexpected shift is something that they're keeping an eye on. And how can you improve this? Really, it's kind of like setting width and height in your CSS. A lot of them maybe has to do in sliders, making sure you basically reserve space. I think of this as like holding space in a line so that, if somebody else joins later, they're not going to move everything back. Just reserving that space for content on the page. You could also think about eliminating or optimizing ads on your page. So that, again, that content isn't jumping around or moving unexpectedly for your users. Now you're like, okay, you said the core web vitals are helping focus and prioritize some of these elements for my team in order to understand how to improve the experience on our site, but where do I start? There are definitely a lot of tools out there to help you measure this page experience. And actually, as of last month, Google released a new report within Search Console. So there's a couple within Search Console. At the top right here, you can see an example of this page experience report, which is the one they just rolled out in April of 2021. And what this does is it really tries to combine the Core Web Vitals report with other metrics that are part of the page experience update. So you can kind of see under this page experience signals here, they have your Core Web Vitals. So if your site has some kind of opportunity for improvement in the Core Web Vitals, you would see a note here, and then you could click through and understand which vital you need to improve on, and then kind of get some more information. It also pulls through, like we were saying, mobile usability, any security issues, or HTTPS. So this is a great place to kind of go to just understand your current site performance. And again, Google is trying to make this more clear for everyone to understand how they rank and how they'll be impacted by this page experience update. Also in Search Console, you can see the Core Web Vitals report right under that. So again, if you're in this report, you can get there pretty quickly, but you can also just go directly to the Core Web Vitals report. Other tools that you can use are the page speed insights. So again, we talked about about the lab data and the field data, and there's a great session about the Core Web Vitals updates from the Google I/O conference in May that has a really clear explanation of what reports are using what data and where you should go to like leverage each type of data. Again, the lab data, really helpful for when you're kind of testing and putting things in a controlled environment to try and understand how it will impact that field data or the real users using this in the wild. They have a picture of zoo animals, which I think is really great, and then like lab, like people and experiments in the lab. So keeping those like zoo animals and lab data. Anyway, the lab data and page speed insights is fed from the Lighthouse report. So the page speed insights is also a great place to look because it shows you a mixture of both, and they do need to work together, right? You can't just look at one and optimize for one because the lab data will impact field data. You need to understand that real user experience. So page speed insights, great place to look to see both types of data. Other tools you can kind of dive into. The Chrome user experience report is feeding that field data piece on page speed insights. So it's pulling from, again, that real world field data. Other tools are great to just understand the flow of your site, like heat mapping tools like Mouseflow or Hotjar or even Crazy Egg. So really a lot of tools out there. Google is trying to give a lot of guidance around where to start, again, to prioritize and focus so that you understand how you may be impacted kind of by these page experience updates. So one of those is also content. So we didn't have anything that talks about content on these first slides, but that is also a really big part of Google's ranking algorithm and these page experience updates.
Thanks, Anna. So in addition to the 3 Core Web Vitals that are being introduced that Anna walked through with us, Google is going to continue to emphasize the importance of content. And content is the primary reason users are seeking out and staying on a website. So while the Core Web Vitals are critical to UX, the content actually is what's engaging them, that's driving them deeper into your website, and it's going to be a huge component to driving conversion outcomes. So Google says it best that a good page experience doesn't override having great relevant content. And as Martin Splitt sums it up well, that with page experience, it's about delivering content faster and better for the user. Bad content delivered faster is still bad content, and Google isn't going to prioritize that over what's good content, but has just as equal of a page user experience. So what is it that Google's taking a look at when they're analyzing if you have good content or not? And that can be summed up by EAT. Google wants us to eat. So what is EAT? E stands for expertise, and there is some key things to think about here for expertise. So Are you focusing on the users and their challenges? Is the content rich with keywords, and is it providing answers to the search query that people are performing? Finally, is the information researched and credible, and does it tell a story through emotion? So this is like one of the key things that I think about here is, if you're looking for financial advice, are you going to trust somebody who's a financial expert and has been in the financial industry for years and years? Or are you going to look for the expertise through a blogger who's been doing a lot of research and maybe has all the facts, but doesn't have that real world experience? So expertise is huge here. And one of the things that also defines expertise, you'll see, is YMYL, which is your money and your life websites. So essentially, these are websites that could impact anything from somebody's happiness to health, financial stability, or safety. And they're typically falling within the medical, financial, or legal field. However, you can say, well, I don't fall into one of those fields. If you even are a retailer and you're taking somebody's credit card information, that would still be qualified under YMYL, because you are impacting somebody's overall financial stability and financial health. So that is going to be a really critical piece. And again, it goes back to the trust. And I feel like the EAT, which is the expertise, authority, and trust, they all really work kind of interchangeably as well. The second piece, the A, the authority. So some things that help increase the authority of our website are a lot through social networks and integration of social media within the site, where you can see that the brand does have authority in a certain space. They are developing brand recognition, and there are other people being engaged within that website and that brand. And then the next piece, trust. So when you're actually visiting the website, does it look legitimate? Are there reviews on the website? Do the reviews read like they're written by a person? Is there a clear way to get in touch with their customer service when you do the contact us? Is it an HTTPS site? And then are there things available like T&C or privacy policy or return policy if it's a retailer? If you're getting information from a blog source like a financial resource, does the author of that content have a biography on the site that you can read through and further establish a sense of trust and use them as an expert in the arena? So Google is matching a browser's intent, not exact keyword match. So that means that you should be spending time researching keywords and phrases before you're writing and publishing new content, thinking about what's actually going to drive the traffic to that page through search results. So some important things to include would be that each keyword should be optimized to be keyword rich. We should include keywords in the headlines and the content, in the meta description and the URL, and also include the keywords within the alt text for images. Google's algorithm is built to reward good content. So applying the EAT or EAT philosophy to your site may positively impact your results during a search. And there are some other questions that Google is asking us to consider when we're evaluating the content. So big picture is the EAT philosophy, but then you can take a look at some of these questions to help you really hone in on each piece of content. So I'm not going to read all of them, but just cherry picking a few. Does the headline or page title provide a descriptive content summary without being exaggerating or shocking? Does the content present information in a way that is trustworthy? Is it clear sourcing, evidence of expertise? Is there a background about the author that publishes it again? And then another piece is, does the content seem to be serving the genuine interest of visitors? So if somebody is entering a search query and then landing on your page from the result, are you actually relevant to the search query that was typed in? That is what's going to make your content rank the best with search engines. And then finally, wrapping up the content piece is some metrics to measure. And these metrics are not equal to all people in the content space. So for example, if you're a retailer, the add to cart button is really critical to measure. But maybe the web form completion is not going to be as critical for your business line. But if you're a service provider, the web form completion would be very critical, or click to call would be very critical. So there's a lot of different metrics that you can measure across analytics and Search Console and some of the other things that Anna had talked about earlier. But you really do need to do your research and determine which one is going to be the most critical to your business, and then continue to measure those month over month, year over year, set some benchmarks for your business, and then set goals into how you can achieve some growth from those metrics with making adjustments to the content and through your user experience with those core web vitals. Are there any questions at all? That's really wrapping up the meat and potatoes piece of the webinar presentation, but we definitely have time for questions if there's any.
Yes, thanks, Rachel. We have a couple of questions that came in. And again, if you have questions that we don't get to, I know we got a few minutes left, we will reply to you directly. One question they have is that Sarah said, we have a lot of content on our website. How can we make sure it is high quality enough?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think some of this is going to be evolving over time. Search Console is going to be adding additional tools that are going to help measure your content. But then some other key pieces into determining what content is vital is you should do an overall content audit. And then in places where you're having smaller chunks of content that maybe you can consolidate into larger content, that would be a really good way to help improve some of that quality score. And the key is quality over quantity always. So make sure that each piece of content that you have is quality, and you don't just have a ton of content that can be consolidated together.
Great, thanks. And we have one other question from John. He said, I heard Google's rolling out additional updates this summer, and how does that differ? I hear you, because I just got the notification that the June core update just kind of finished rolling out, I think earlier this week or something, June 12th. So there are still core updates that are happening almost in parallel with some of these page experience updates, the June core update and the July core update. So those are looking at different signals, but we will have this page experience update rolling out kind of alongside of those as well. So it will be interesting to see if we can pin down, if you see any changes, which update they relate to, right? So there are a couple other core updates rolling out at the same time. And then within the page experience update, we didn't talk about it, but there's also this kind of update to the AMP type pages. Before, you needed to have this AMP format to show up in the top stories carousel, and they're kind of like just doing away with it. So I think in the June part, so in this initial rollout, so if you have been using AMP, a lot of publishers maybe to try and get content into that top stories, it's no longer required to be formatted that way to show up in those top story carousels. So a couple other things there sneaking in there, but definitely a good question.
All right, I think that just about wraps it up time-wise for the webinar. We do have additional resources, and I know that Anna touched on those early on. We are going to have a Google Page Experience checklist, so if you attended, you can get that checklist from us. And we are also offering Meet with a Whereoware expert for a free evaluation of your website. So if you're interested in that, please feel free to reach out to sales@whereoware.com and we will set up a time to meet with you.